I'm Andrea Devin Bertoli, pleasure coach and sex educator. These mindful sex classes are a chance for you to get to know us, and our goal is to get you to know yourself better as well. I work as a sex coach and sex educator, as well as a facilitator of sacred space and beautiful events here and elsewhere. Hire me, please, to come teach at your event. Christopher is a sex therapist and social worker that's been in practice for over 20 years. So, together, we bring kind of different facets of this healing sexuality work to people all around the world. So, thank you for being here. So, in today's class, we are going to talk about multiple orgasms. And like I said a moment ago, it's not really just like how to come a bunch of times. That's great. If that's you, I love this for you. But what we're going to talk about really is kind of taking a step back and really understanding orgasm in a different way and understanding pleasure in a really different way. This is rooted in my work as a tantrika. It's rooted in my research and my anecdotal evidence. And as often comes up in our classes, we had a really fun play date yesterday, Christopher and I did. So we'll probably talk about our sex life too. It's very much a lab for us to explore. So, a little tiny bit about me. So I really approach this work of mindful sexuality and Tantra as a healing practice, just like yoga and breath work and therapy and pharmaceuticals and plant medicines can all be part of your healing journey. I really believe and have personally experienced the transformative power of sexual healing, working through trauma, working through misinformation and miseducation and shame and stigma, and also learning to genuinely love my body and love my pleasure and understand my body in really different ways, and also create that in a partnership. So I bring together the holistic and the esoteric and the woo woo, and I also bring in the very practical, therapeutic, scientific research. So I'm like this little Venn diagram of like hippie and nerd, practical, realistic. A lot of sexuality has been split off from therapeutic approaches, split off from medical approaches, and even split off in the wellness community. And my work and our work collectively here in this group is to help bring that back into wholeness. Your sexuality, your pleasure is a gift. It is part of who you are. And we are constantly shamed and told not to pay attention to it and that it's not important and that we should just suffer through it. And that is just not true. So, these classes, again, are a chance for you to dive in, and it's a chance for me to build community. I got your emails. Thank you for signing up. You will get emails from me after this event with the replay and also with some delicious pleasure education from my Patreon membership based platform. And you can stay in contact, or consent is important, so you can also opt out at any time. We both offer classes, coaching, and workshops online and in person. So if you're interested in working with one or both of us, please do reach out. So I want to make sure to introduce my beloved and have him speak into our circle as well.
Hey y'all, I'm Christopher Brown. It's a pleasure to assist Andrea in teaching these classes. As she mentioned, I'm a psychotherapist and a sex therapist with a telehealth practice. I'm licensed in Texas, Colorado, and California, and provide coaching nationwide in the US and even occasionally in other countries. So I get a lot. What's the difference between therapy and coaching? Therapy is when I and you come to practice with a diagnosable disorder that we're then going to assess, diagnose, and then launch into therapy with the goal of getting you into remission from said disorder, right? So that's intensive therapy. Then everything else is coaching, right? And so my practice at this point is focused a lot on helping folks who are doing ethical non-monogamy. I identify as polyamorous, also cis, straight, but I live in a dual orientation or a mixed orientation relationship. And so that's Andrea and me, and we'll talk a lot about that as we go, right? So we're going to talk today, as we talk every week about, or every month, I should say, about how to bring the light and the shadow into real sex education. And so with orgasm, it's really pretty easy to think about the light side, the pleasure side, the fun side, but we're also going to talk about the shadow of orgasm and the shadow of what we're taught about orgasm wherever you got your initial sex education, whether that was through probably, if you're in the United States, an unscientifically based program because sex education is not required to be medically accurate, by the way, in the United States. Or if you're like me and you got your sex education through pornography and you were never given the message that porn is fantasy, I got the message that porn was the way sex was supposed to work. So we're going to try to unwind a lot, and that's kind of the surprise message in the orgasm class is to get to all the orgasms you can have. Although I already heard somebody in the chat say, I found 22. So they have clearly done the unwinding of what you have to unlearn about orgasm to experience all 21 other types. So we're going to effort to do that today, and it's the start of a journey. If anything about this piques your interest, reach out to Andrea or for me for expansion, because we can help you take what you learned today. Think of what you learned today as seeds that we're planting. If you want to water that and nurture it with either one of us, we're available for it. So I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for taking the chance on us. We're going to get right to the program. Andrea, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks to all the folks that just joined during our intro. So this is our multiple orgasm class. Just make sure you're in the right place. I want to just say, so first of all, I want to congratulate the person in chat who has 22 different types of orgasm. Amazing. And it is also not a competition. So if you're like, what the fuck? I have no idea what this person is talking about. It's okay. We'll talk through it and you'll learn some of the different ways and you can start yourself on your own journey. So this is never meant to be prescriptive. It is always meant to be an invitation, right? This is an invitation into your body, your unique, beautiful, erotic mosaic, right? All the different ways that we're wired, all the different ways that you respond to pleasure, all the different ways that you enjoy sex and toys and stimulation in all sorts of different forms. Like you have this unique mosaic, and your mosaic is for you to discover. And we'll talk about how being on this kind of multiple orgasmic journey can help you find all that pleasure. It is a bucket list. Yes, for sure. Yes, babe.
One thing for the group, I have to duck out a little bit early today, so I'm monitoring the chat, but at some point I'm going to turn that over to Andrea. I'm going to get fingerprinted by the state of California because therapists has to get fingerprinted and be on a database with the Department of Justice and the FBI to practice. We can all speculate on why that is, but I got to do it, so I got to duck out a little bit early. So I apologize for my absence at the end, but I just wanted to let y'all know so you're not surprised when I disappear.
All right. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We are going to blow your mind and really change the definition of orgasm that you may have. Then we will talk about specific practices and wisdom to help you start to explore and expand your own unique pleasure map and start to explore some of these different types of orgasm. The third thing we're going to do is then talk about how to bring this into your own play and if and when you have partners to bring it into partnered play. So we're going to start with this question of what is an orgasm? And I want you to think about it for just a moment about like, what does it mean to have an orgasm? What does it feel like in your body? Does it always feel the same? Are there certain types of orgasms that feel better? Um, do orgasms always feel good? For a lot of people, they don't actually. So I'll have Christopher talk about that in a moment. But I want you to think about like where you learned what an orgasm was and what it was quote unquote supposed to be. And I want you to also think about if you have a beloved, if you have a partner, what does their orgasm mean to you? What happens if you're making love? And we'll expand that definition too. And your partner doesn't have an orgasm. regardless of their sex, right? Whether they have a penis or a pussy or something else. What if my partner doesn't come? What does that say about me? What if I don't come? What does that say about my partner or about my body, right? So as I start to ask these questions and you start to noodle on them, like you may notice some constriction, you may notice some shame, you may notice some curiosity, right? Like all of that is normal and totally welcome. And again, we have been miseducated, misinformed, and many of us mistreated. And therefore, our definitions of orgasm and pleasure might be different. So, when we think of kind of standard or traditional or normal, quote unquote normal orgasms, it's often this like contraction of the pelvic floor, right? And it can be so much more. Yes, Christopher.
So, Andrea, I've wondered if you might share your earliest definition of what orgasm was and where it came from.
Mm,
Just to give the group sort of a model as we reflect back on how we learned what we learned initially about orgasm. I have
mm.
mine if you don't have yours, so I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I think that might help humanize it a bit.
Yeah, so my orgasmic journey is that I'm one of the blessed few that can have orgasms in my sleep. And so that was how I felt orgasms for the first time was in dreams, in sleep. And sometimes I wake up coming, sometimes I wake up kind of right afterwards. Um, this has persisted since I was a child. So I always kind of had this capacity in me. And then I started having sex at 16 and it felt good, but I didn't know how to have kind of that experience, that orgasmic experience. And then I went to a psychology of sex class in university, my first couple years of university, and I saw a woman on video having an orgasm. And I thought, I gotta figure that shit out. And so I went home and played with my sex toys that I had at the time and kind of, quote unquote, figured it out. And I learned how to manually bring myself to orgasm. And for me, that was kind of this buildup of pleasure, this kind of explosion of energy, and then not so much a refractory period, but like a kind of relaxation, right? And then maybe I would go again, maybe I would do just one, kind of depends. But and that was kind of my journey all through my 20s and 30s. And then when I started discovering Tantra, I started to explore all of these different pleasure possibilities, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But like then I figured out what it was like to have an energetic orgasm. Then I figured out, excuse me, what it was like to have a nipple orgasm and a throat orgasm. And recently, and we'll talk about this later, also, I got a different type of sex toy that has made me into a prolific squirter. Like this has not been something that was on the menu previously for me, and now it's something that I can reliably and consistently get to with this particular toy. And I'm getting closer in an analog way. So all that is to say, there is this kind of ever expanding definition of orgasm, not only just as this peak pleasure, right? If we think about the linear model, right? We build, 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 and then we plateau, and then we peak, and then we're done. That's a very linear model. And what we know now is that arousal, especially women's arousal, is a little bit more like this. We start here and then we go here and then we move here and then it disappears a little bit and then it comes back and then we do another few circles around. So understanding pleasure and orgasm not in this linear fashion has been really helpful on my journey and also understanding that there's this ever unfolding kind of capacity in my body. So I'd love to hear yours then, Christopher.
Thank you. So everyone, your task is while we're telling you these stories, come up with your own template. If you had to tell your story of how you were introduced to orgasm in, you know, two to four paragraphs, right? So here's mine. A friend of mine, a male friend of mine, found a VHS porn tape at my father's house back in the day, and we watched it when they were out and we were left alone, and we watched this man ejaculate. And it's an important distinction there with those words. We watched this man ejaculate, and we're like, "What is that? That can't be real. What is that?" So then, when I discovered a certain sitcom back in the day, I started masturbating. I didn't know what would happen, and I had an ejaculation for the first time when I was awake. I'd had some nocturnal emissions, some wet dreams. I thought I broke myself. I thought I broke myself. That was my introduction to what I thought orgasm was. So that was my beginning. And I won't tell you the full story like Andrea did. I'll save kind of how my definition has evolved. But I want us all to think, how did we start? How did we start our relationship to orgasm? Okay, that was my beginning.
Thank you. So again, we have this idea, most of us have this idea that orgasm is this linear process, right? And this was the Masters and Johnson model from the 50s, which was we start here, we climb this kind of invisible staircase, maybe we plateau a little bit, maybe for a second, maybe for 10 minutes, and then we have this other little peak, and then boom, we fall off the cliff of orgasm. That's an outdated model, and yet that's still what we see in porn. It's still what we see in romantic comedies. Even in like erotica written by women for women. There's this very kind of linear model. And it was one of the big complaints in this erotic book club that I was in the erotic anthology, where I was like, everybody came in like 30 seconds of penetration. And even though it was queer sex and kinky sex and all different types of sex, it was like there's still this expectation that we're all coming in like 30 seconds of stimulation. And that's just not true. So if that is an expectation that you have, please let's dismantle that right now. So, scratching the linear model, understanding that arousal is a little bit more of this kind of looping, winding, yellow brick road situation. And also understanding that, again, there are different types of orgasms. So, in the tantric tradition, we would talk about peak and valley orgasms. And so, the peak is kind of what we think of as that linear model, right? We build and we have this crescendo or this activity at the top, and then we kind of go crashing down. But in a valley orgasm, we actually have this kind of like slow build, right? Like you're going on a wandering path where like the pleasure builds and then it kind of decreases and then it builds and it kind of decreases. And when you're in that space, it can be this really like extended orgasmic practice, which is really beautiful. And then it asks the question, well, if my orgasm isn't this peak kind of orgasm, like is the whole thing an orgasm? Like kind of, yes. Because if we think about orgasm as energy, and if it's energy that's moving through our body in this continuous way, then yes, you can have 5 minute, 10 minute, 30 minute orgasms. And so if you've ever heard this kind of urban legend about tantrikas making love for like 10 hours on end, this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about just, bang, 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 pounding at someone for like 10 hours. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this slow flow, this kind of like almost like you're floating in the ocean of pleasure. And that in and of itself is an orgasmic experience. And the other thing, which Christopher mentioned a moment ago, and this is for all my people with penises or people that have sex with people with penises, orgasm and ejaculation are different things. And so, if you have never heard this before, I know some of you have been in my classes before and you've heard this, but if this is a new idea to you, I want you to really just like close your eyes and think about that for a second. What would it mean for you or your partner to really have a felt sense that orgasm and ejaculation were separate? Because they are. And it is absolutely something that you can practice and explore. And like anything, like learning the piano or learning French, like this is not something that you just decide to do and do it. This takes a lot of body awareness, takes a lot of skill and practice. And yes, you can get there. And I will leave it to Christopher to talk about kind of what that feels like, because I think it's a really important way to understand how we think of orgasm.
So for penis owners, I was just chatting with somebody, a new person to both Andrea and me on a dating app, and she said, "Are you multi-orgasmic?" And I said, yes. And she said, I'd never met a penis owner who was multi-orgasmic. And it wasn't a therapy session, it wasn't a coaching session, so I didn't engage in this. But my thought is, oh, you're operating on that initial definition of orgasm that I had, which is orgasm equals ejaculation for people with penises, particularly. Right. And I no longer have that definition. And so there's a little bit of a shadow here. I said earlier, we're going to talk about the light and the shadow. So I get a lot of people who come into my practice or Andrea's practice who want to have multiple ejaculations more quickly, more easily, more readily available. That can happen for penis owners, but it's unreliable. What is reliable if we shift and broaden our definition of orgasm from that ejaculation that I experienced early on, masturbating to a sitcom or watching it on that movie in that movie, where if I expand my definition of orgasm to be the buildup and release of tension, the buildup and release of tension. Okay, with that definition, go back to Andrea's story about the valley orgasm, where you can, have these small builds and releases, small builds and releases. Penis owners can have the same, right? So if you feel tension build up, you can actually, if you're slow enough and have enough of an observational skill, which we'll talk about, then you can pause, you can feel your cock vibrate, you can feel the release of tension without an ejaculation. And then it has a mini refractory period without losing your erection, right? So you can restart a sexual experience as if you have come through in an ejaculatory way, but it's without the ejaculate, right? So that's the big difference. So the bummer for people is, oh, I wanted to blow 5 loads in, half an hour. And it's like, oh, I don't have that available to you. But what I do have available to you is that experience, that slow experience of feeling tension build and release and release and release and to start to build again. So the male equivalent of that valley orgasm, like Andrea is talking about.
And I think one of the things that's also embedded into this, into the valley orgasm and into the non ejaculatory orgasm, is really this idea of bringing the pleasure into your whole body, right? So often we think about sex, we think about masturbation, we think about fucking as like really just focused on the genitals, right? Maybe you include some nipples and maybe you do some making out too, but like for the most part, pornography, romantic comedies, erotica focus on the genitals. Well, what if you can not only start to experience these orgasms in different ways, but also start to feel more of the pleasure and actually start to move it into your body, the whole rest of your body? And what this might look like is taking some really deep breaths and imagining, got to use your imagination skills here, that you're bringing that sexual energy up from your genitals into your belly, into your chest, into your heart, into your throat, into your head, maybe even into your arms, right? For anybody that's done breath work, you can feel that kind of energy as it starts to move through you. And maybe you get it in your hands and you get tingles. Last night we were making love and Christopher had like whole body tingles and whole body convulsions that were pretty awesome. and and for me it feels like, how can I move this energy into my heart so that I can start to feel more love and more compassion and more self awareness and self love? How can I move that energy into my hands so that they actually start like vibrating, where it's not just an orgasm in my pussy, but it's like actually my hands are moving or my toes are clenching, or I feel it kind of like sparkles or champagne bubbles in my head. This is all possible. Yeah.
So Andrea has said something that was revolutionary to me in my evolution of orgasmic definition and experience. And she said energetic orgasm. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it is the ability to feel full body tension and energy building and release without actually any genital touch necessary, right? So this idea of energetic orgasm, frankly, I didn't believe it. When I met Andrea, 3 or 4 years ago, we were at a Tantra training where we did energetic orgasmic breathing as a group. And I thought all that was bullshit. And so a skeptic went into the practices, but I had to use what I call my participate skill, which is when I'm sitting there judging something that I don't like or talking bad about it to myself, do it anyway. Suspend the judgment, Christopher, and participate, right? So the participate skill is what I will offer you as a starting place, right? If you can participate in something, even if you're skeptical, it's still possible. So I started having my first energetic orgasms, and I'm like, holy shit, like this. And again, I was the skeptic. I was the skeptic. So Andrea goes into most things wanting to believe. I go into most things with a default for bullshit. But the idea of an energetic experience is what Andrea is talking about. So since that experience where remember my initial definition of orgasm for penis owners was just an ejaculation, right? Now I go into believing this energetic thing and I started thinking, okay, what are the bridges we can build between the physical and the energetic? So when she's talking about us having sex last night and I feel goosebumps all over my body, and she described it as toes clenching and then letting go. Remember the definition, tension building and releasing. Tension building and releasing, right? So that's exactly what happened for me last night was this cross experience of having physical stimulation with this amazing person and an energetic building and releasing. And the releasing was like a wave of goose flesh all over my body. It was like, okay, yep, there's a bridge there. So again, with time and practice and holding yourself gently, you can build that bridge between the physical and the energetic. But the energetic, I really want to highlight because that was sort of the mind opening expansion for me. And just hearing it, again, my inner skeptic came up. But the practice and the felt experience with other people really made me a believer.
Yeah. Yes. One kind of other caveat I'd like to add here is again, these are all invitations, right? If this interests you, great. Call us, work with us, hire us, do more classes with other people that you like and trust. Awesome. If this doesn't interest you and you're just like, yo, I just want to like bang one out and go to sleep, or I just like, I got to go to work, I need to have an orgasm, get, this off my brain. Awesome. I am here for that. Like, yes, take orgasms like coffee breaks. Like, yes, bang one out before you need to go to sleep. Like, yes, have a quickie in the kitchen. For sure. This is not to say to not do those things or not experience pleasure in those ways. My goal here is to again expand your definition so that you just broaden your menu. Not that you have to take your favorite things off the menu, but that you try a new restaurant and try new food sometimes. Um, Okay, so part two. Now, I really want to talk about like all the different kind of orgasmic capabilities that our beautiful bodies have. So, first of all, one thing to know is that literally every nerve fiber in your body has the potential to be orgasmic. Right? So, I want you to think about that for a second. Like, if again, taking sex out of the genitals and bringing sex into the whole body, I have a friend who can have orgasms just by somebody touching her forehead. Sometimes when Christopher kisses me and sticks his tongue down my throat, I can feel it directly in my pussy, right? There are these nerve endings in our skin that light up when you touch them very slowly. And all of these are possible to expand, right? You can imagine somebody who's maybe had spinal cord injuries, who doesn't have feeling in their genitals, they can transform their ears, their neck, their nipples, their lips into completely orgasmic experiences. So if you, as we talk about nipple orgasms and throat orgasms, and you're like, what the fuck, that doesn't feel natural to me, that's okay. Again, participate and give yourself a chance to open up those pathways, right? So if you have never learned another language, the first language you are going to learn is going to be tricky, right? It is hard to train your brain to learn a new language. But once you study French and then you learn Spanish and then you learn maybe Portuguese, those pathways get stronger, right? So it's the same with our body. If you are not sure how sensitive your nipples are, you can start to explore really gently and you can pair it with other pleasure that you know you like. You can go really slowly and start to be really gentle and curious with your body, especially if you are still cycling like me. My shit changes every week, right? Sometimes my tits feel super sensitive and want to be touched, and sometimes don't touch me because everything hurts, right? So if you are a menstruator still, then you know that that might change. Same thing, if you have an injury, your body might not feel great sometimes, it might feel better at other times. So understanding what's possible does not necessarily mean that you will get there right away. There are these pathways and this practice to explore. So, for people with penises, here are just some of the things you can experience. First of all, you can have what are called P-spot orgasms. So this is playing with your prostate, which is most easily accessed through the bum. So you can put in a finger or a small toy to start to um, access your prostate. And even before that, you can start with external stimulation of your anus to start to bridge those pathways. Yes.
For my straight guys out there, this does not make you gay. This does not make you gay. Your anus does not have a sexual orientation. It just has nerve endings and within it a prostate.
So anal play can be a barrier for a lot of people. And for a lot of people with penises, like this is a gateway to a fundamentally different experience of pleasure. Not only are you taking your pleasure from the external genitalia and turning it literally inwards into your body, you get to have this experience of, again, internal stimulation or internal penetration, and you also have literally a magic button in your butt that helps bring so much pleasure into your body. So you can have anal orgasms just from having a toy inserted or having a plug inserted or having, just being fucked with a finger or with a dildo. You can also have specific prostate orgasms, which are direct stimulation of the prostate. And you can play with that type of pleasure. The first time we did this years ago, it was like I had my finger in his bum and he had such a powerful orgasm that like surprised him. Like he was like, what the fuck? What like what happened? Right? Because it can be so pleasurable and like it was not expected. So yeah.
And this is the perfect time, I think, to pick up a thread that Andrea said earlier. Not everybody enjoys their orgasm.
Mm.
So if we go back, so this is after I saw the porn where I thought, oh my God, gross, what is that? And then I had my first orgasm. I thought I broke my penis, right? So in between that and my discovery of energetic orgasms, there was this period where I hated my orgasm because what that meant was if I came, and remember, I'm straight, so my second partnered sexual experiences were with women, then I'm going to come too fast before she does, right? So the goal, one, I didn't want to have an ejaculation. Notice the difference, right? I didn't understand the difference at the time, but I didn't want to ejaculate because I didn't want to come before she did, and I didn't want sex to be over. Andrea sent me a reel on Instagram yesterday, and it was basically this trope, right? Of like, hey, I thought you could last a really long time. I could in 20 minutes. I mean, so for me, I didn't want to ejaculate because I didn't want to come before my partner. Okay, that's one. The second thing is I was terrified about an unwanted pregnancy, right? So the whole time I'm thinking, oh my God, if I come in, what if I have a birth control failure? What if I mean, there's all this worry about my orgasm specifically. So when I met Andrea and we started talking about our sexual experiences, my associations with orgasms were all negative, all negative. And then with the anal play, I'm like, oh my God, it throws me into this existential goddamn crisis that if I like having my ass touched, does that make me gay? It does not, guys. Did I mention that? This does not make us gay. Right. But now what I realize, now that I can actually have pleasure in my own body and all kinds of different kinds of orgasms, The fastest way to get to my arousal is putting a plug in my butt. I mean, y'all, if you had asked me a few years ago if that was going to be true, that version of me would have like looked at you as if you had sprouted a second head from your shoulders. Right? So please don't wait as long as I did to really grapple and unwind this idea that anal play for guys is going to make me gay. It's not. It's going to turn you on. It's going to turn you on.
Yes, it is going to turn you on. The putting in a butt plug feels like turning on the light switch to his arousal, which is pretty awesome. Um, Okay, so for those with vulvas, I have my little puppet here. There are lots of possibilities. So again, most of us are kind of most familiar with clitoral orgasms, this external stimulation of the clitoris. Clitoris is all of this inside of our bodies. We have the clitoral legs, we have the bulbs. All of this is erectile tissue that is as much erectile tissue as a penis but takes 20 to 40 minutes to be fully aroused. So if you touch yourself for a few minutes and you're like, ugh, why am I not wet? Why am I not turned on? Why is my pussy not wet? You need more time. That is that is a rule. Can people get turned on in 5 minutes? Absolutely. But generally, yes, we need a little bit more time. So, clitoral orgasms are, on the one hand, it's been really awesome to see so many people talk about the clitoris and it's so great. And like vibrators are empowerment. And yes, that is true. And also, I invite you, again, it is an invitation. I'm not telling you you're doing it wrong. But if your only pathway to stimulation is to directly stimulate your clit and use a really strong vibrator, I invite you to try different access points of pleasure. So maybe you start with petting your pussy. Maybe you start with some inner labia strokes. Maybe you go analog and just use your fingers for a while to start to bring back some of the sensitivity and some of the nuance that's possible in your pussy. We also have this myth that people with pussies are supposed to climax wildly from penetration. And actually, only a very small percentage of us can do that. Something like 4 to 10%, right? Often that's because don't give ourselves the full capacity of our arousal, right? Again, 20 to 40 minutes is pretty average. But we can absolutely have vaginal orgasms because when we are super turned on, when we engage all of this tissue, these clitoral bulbs right here swell and they wrap around the entrance to the vagina. So now when I put something in the vagina, it's actually being squeezed. So it feels better for us, feels better for a person if they're inside of us. So you can absolutely train yourself, sensitize yourself to have more pleasurable penetration and potentially orgasm from penetration. You can also have cervical orgasms where when we have deep arousal, really, really, really deep safety and trust, we can start to very gently stimulate the cervix inside of our vagina and notice what comes up. This is an area that I'm still kind of exploring, but we've played with it a lot and explored it a little bit, and it really does feel very different. It feels like a very deep kind of experience that's not, again, not orgasmic in the truest sense, but kind of these waves of kind of really deep pleasure. You can also have G-spot orgasms, right? So G-spot is a little bit of a misnomer because it is not one specific spot. It's actually the entire, what's called the clitoral urethral vaginal complex, which is a boring word for a really awesome spot in our body, which is basically about an inch or two inside the vagina. That whole anterior, so front wall, so facing the belly button, is lined with erectile tissue that wraps around the urethra. So when we stimulate that, and not everybody likes this type of stimulation, not everybody likes it all the time. Sometimes you need to be really turned on. Sometimes it needs to be at the beginning. It kind of depends. But when you stimulate that, you may start to stimulate some of that erectile tissue that works around the urethra that can sometimes involve a squirting orgasm. Squirting orgasms are a little bit different, much like in penis bodies, orgasm and ejaculation are separate. So squirting is sometimes separate from orgasm, sometimes it's at the same time, right? So I've definitely had different types of squirting orgasms. Some of them are just at high arousal, some of them are at kind of a peak orgasm experience. Um, Sometimes it's a little bit, sometimes it's like, oh God, we have to clean the carpet tomorrow. It just really depends on a lot of different factors. Cannabis super helps. We use cannabis a lot in our play, especially for me. When I'm a little bit high, I can usually have some pretty amazing waterfall experiences. Of course, people with pussies can also have anal orgasms. So it's another way to start to blend the pleasure, right? So when I first started to explore anal play, I did it on my own because I hadn't really explored with partners before. I started using external stimulation and then I would use a finger. I basically gave myself carpal tunnel one summer because I was like super into it. Um, and it wasn't in that it immediately felt good. It actually didn't feel good at first, but what I did was I bridged it. So I would use my favorite vibrator on my clitoris and I would start to stimulate my bum so that I could start to kind of pair those pleasure pathways, right? Like anal is not super pleasurable, but clitoral is. And so eventually those pathways start to merge together, and anal pleasure can now be pretty fabulous. We also have a super secret button that, if you can imagine, putting one digit in the vagina and one digit in the bum and kind of squeezing them together. There's a little bit of erectile tissue in there called the perineal tissue, or the perineal sponge, excuse me. And that can be super stimulating. So you just very gently stimulating the wall between the vagina and the anus. Super fun, super delicious. So, Christopher, you want to add something?
I just wanted to say, and this could work regardless of sex, right? So Andrea did exactly that, and I was a participant as well. So we did it for me, which was the initial anal play for me was stimulated with cock massage so that I could start to associate pleasure with anal experience. So that's a really, really valuable tip. And Andrea, just a reminder, I'm going to have to duck out in a few minutes. There's a cool discussion going on in the chat about sex post-menopause. And so
Awesome.
I dropped down the moisturize, lubricate, utilize for folks with vulvas. So just so you have that to build off of for later.
Yeah, anything you want to add before you duck out for your logistics?
No, I mean, just please keep going. And for all of you listening to Andrea, she's had such an expansive journey that if there's any word she says that piques your curiosity, drop it in the chat and she can give you more about it because she talks about these things because, it's so integrated into who she is and she's growing from here. But I know I, for one, started at a different part in my journey with orgasm. So there are things that I may be talking about or she may be talking about that we just kind of skip over that you want to hear more about. So if there's anything like that, please drop it in the chat so she can check it out in the Q&A.
Yeah.
That's it.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll switch over to Q&A at about the top of the hour. So, one thing I want to add, and back to what you were saying, Christopher, is like when we first started exploring anal play for you, you had never really done it, like once or twice as a kid, it seems like, but never really as an adult. And when we first started playing with it, I would be massaging his cock and giving him, maybe a blow job, maybe a hand job, and start to add in anal play. And every time he would lose his erection, it would just be like I would touch his butt and his erection would go soft. And that happened for a really long time until, again, like those pathways were created where it was like, oh, now these are combined. And now his brain and his body understand that anal play is really exciting. And like he said, if we want to get started, and he's quite responsive in his desire, as am I. So sometimes if he like wants to kind of turn himself on quickly, putting in a plug is a really great way to do it because it's literally like a light switch for his body. Before we move on to the next section, I really want to talk about kind of the different types of orgasms all bodies can have, right? So all bodies have a bum, so all bodies can enjoy anal pleasure. Not everybody does, but I invite you to give it a try. and give yourself time to explore it. But like I was saying earlier, we can also have nipple orgasms. We can also have ear orgasms. Like I can make him almost come from nibbling on his ears, right? And that didn't happen a year ago. That's kind of a new sensitivity that we have developed. Um, One of the things we've realized that really turns me on is like very intense, strong touch, right? So, like a really deep massage, like especially on the back of my neck or my shoulders, that is borderline orgasmic for me. That feels really cool. Nipples are another great sensitivity spot. And I think, um, again, Christopher, your body is a really good example because they're very sensitive. And if I just like out of the blue, like go for his nips, it freaks him out. Like it's a startle response because they're so sensitive. But once he's super aroused, he can take a lot of like biting and pulling and squeezing, right? So that's the other thing to remember is that something that we like kind of at the beginning of arousal may not be the thing we like near the end of arousal. And that may change kind of throughout the sexual journey. The intensity, the speed, the placement, stuff can move around, right? Like my clitoris changes size and shape and moves around. So it may not be the same. And this is a great opportunity to lean into curiosity and not get caught up in the, oh, I should know better, or wait, but I was doing this. Why don't they love me? That kind of thing, right? Which we all have that capacity for. So, Christopher, what do you want to add to that?
So last thing for me and Andrea, so arousal non-concordance has come up in the chat.
Great.
Also, this is a shout out to the late great Betty Dodson, who did masturbation circles with women with the old school magic wand vibrator. And if you've ever used one or seen one, super, super powerful. And part of what Betty would do with her clients who were masturbating with her, saying, don't take it off your clit. You can take it. You can take it. And the analogous for penis owners is after you have an ejaculation and your head is super sensitive, you can take it. You can take it. Your body can take more pleasure than you realize, but there are times where pleasure and pain get miscoded. That's what Andrea is talking about here. So there are times where she goes for our nipples at the beginning and I code it as pain. But when arousal is high in my body, now I code that same pain as pleasure, right? So again, you think about if you're masturbating with your clitoris and you come and you pull off the vibrator, play with not taking it away, breathing and telling yourself, you can take it, you can take more, you can take more. It's in you because it is. Okay. Thank you all, fellow travelers. I'll see y'all next time.
I love.
Bye.
The other thing I want to add is really this idea of a megagasm. And we got this term from Annie Sprinkle, who's a fabulous sex educator, PhD educator, wonderful person, and has been making pornography and sex ed for decades. And she talks about having a megagasm, which is this kind of unending, very expansive, very explosive, but valley orgasm, where it's not just one peak, it really is this kind of continual experience of pleasure. And she talked about in a video from probably 1985, she talked about, I need to have a megagasm like once a month just to clear out the spiritual gunk, right? Because we're really like moving through a lot of energy, we're moving through a lot of physical stuff, and it can be really, really fun. But again, we have to train ourselves to get there. So I want you to imagine that you have a pleasure ceiling, right? I think I can handle this much pleasure. I think I can handle this much touch. I think I can handle this much stimulation. And there are ways to expand your pleasure ceiling continually so that you can start to feel more, start to feel some of this other stimulation and these mega gasms and things like that. So our third part is how do we make this stuff happen? So the first, and like we've said already, is really start solo. Like really give yourself over to solo pleasure. Yes, to having quickies so that you can knock out and go to sleep, but also what would it mean to really give yourself a half an hour long pleasure session or an hour long pleasure session, right? Can you give yourself over to play and experimentation and curiosity just with yourself? Maybe it's specifically to explore something new, like, oh, I want to try some anal stimulation, like I learned about in the workshop, or yeah, I want to try doing some analog pleasure without my toys. Give yourself over to curiosity. Use those bridges that you know that you like, right? I love clitoral stimulation, and so I'm going to bridge that with some nipple stimulation so that I can start to bring this sensitivity into my nipples and start to bridge those pleasure pathways. The other thing that is good for all bodies is really to slow way down. Whatever you are doing, do it much, much slower. And be with your body, be with your breath, focus on sensation. What is happening in my skin? What can I smell? What can I taste? What am I looking at? Can I look at my body? Can I look at something? I look at the sky? Can I look at nature? How do you get all of your senses involved so that not only are you touching one physical spot or working with your arousal in some way, but you're bringing your whole body into the experience? This is another way to remain super present and super focused on what's happening, but it also makes sex feel better. The other thing that is important for all bodies is to really focus on your breath. This is so vital to moving pleasure through your body and feeling more pleasure. If you are building pleasure in your body and you are breathing like this, right? It's all constricted, right? But if you are building pleasure in your body and you are instead breathing, ah, ah, right? Like that is gonna move all that energy in you. And even just doing that, I can feel the goosebumps on my arms. I feel my chest open. I feel all of this energy kind of move through me, even with just those three breaths, right? So no matter what type of body you have, no matter what type of pleasure you're doing, focusing on the breath again and again and again, coming back to it is so, so vital. So the other thing would add is for people with pussies is to really understand your body, right? Like make sure you really know your anatomy and know how your specific body works, how your labia look, what they like, how your outer labia like to be touched, how your clitoris likes to be touched, and how it moves as you get more aroused and becomes more prominent or kind of hides a little bit. All of that is normal and natural. Understanding how your body responds to arousal is one of the gifts you can give yourself. And yes to analog play, right? Learning how to kind of desensitize and resensitize ourselves to softer pleasure is really great. And then also, I'm a fan of toys, right? A beautiful dildo that helps you expand your internal pleasure. I wrote in the chat earlier the magic toy that has turned me into a really prolific squirter is the Womanizer. It's one of the suction vibrators. Super highly recommend. Um, Getting specific toys that work for butt stuff versus vaginal stuff. I like to keep them separate. So I have some toys that go in the bum, some toys that go in my pussy. Um, and there's lots of different ones to explore. So don't just try one butt plug and then just assume it's not for you. Try different sizes, try different weights, try different shapes, right? There's lots of different ways to explore. The other thing I would really invite you to do, and this kind of goes for all bodies, is really like try and do it in different ways. Like if you always masturbate in bed, lying down, like try and do it in the shower, maybe in the bathtub, or go do it in the living room one day when you're hanging out at home and you have privacy and you want to explore. Like give yourself over to really making love to yourself in a way that brings in novelty and brings in playfulness. Um, I used to have a roof deck where I could go up in the early morning at like 9 o'clock and have my tits out and like masturbate, and like it was like a prayer to the trees and to the sky and to the sunshine. Right now, our new roof deck is a little exposed, and I'm not quite the exhibitionist, so we'll have to figure out some plants to hide my pleasure sessions. Um, and Christopher said this already, but have someone talk you through it. This might be yourself. Stay with it. You can do this. Let's be playful. Let's let ourselves try a little bit of a different thing. I really want you to keep going. Like, yes, you can do it. You can talk to yourself. I have talked myself through many orgasms and 10 out of 10 would recommend. Also, super hot to have therapy daddy talk you through it. So I talk him through orgasms. He talks me through orgasms. Really, really fun. Okay, the final things I want to add for people with penises as you start to explore these things, again, I invite you to start solo. I want you to imagine that generally, most people with penises learn to masturbate like they are sprinting to the finish line. We are going to get in and get it done as quickly and as quietly as possible. I invite you to slow the fuck down. Give yourself over to 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of pleasure and start to remember, especially if you are partnered, that you are training for a marathon. This is not a sprint. Again, sprinting is fine. Sometimes you need to do that. I'm here for that. And as you start to explore your capacity, it is about going really slowly and following what I would call the arousal staircase. I'll drop a link in a moment about that, about kind of starting from zero, going from one to two to three, maybe up to five or six, and then backing off, right? Building your arousal and then backing off. This is also known as edging. Super important for people with penises to practice, not only to expand your pleasure, but also to start to feel into your orgasm that is separate from ejaculation. That is one of the best ways to explore that. The other thing I would invite you into is start to practice both kind of this mindfulness, right? Using your breath, being in your body. Same thing I said earlier, being in your sensation. What do I feel? What do I taste? What do I smell? What am I listening to? Be in it and also have a little bit of an observational distance to say, like, okay, where am I at? Do I want to back off? Do I need to ramp it up? Can I back down? Right? I've heard other teachers and other men tell me that oftentimes men are taught to last longer by distracting themselves, right? Like focusing on baseball or like thinking about grandma or whatever. Um, that may work to last longer, but it means you are not in your body. It means you are in your head and distanced from what's happening, and your partner will be able to feel that. They will wonder, where has my lover gone? Right? So, practicing solo, being in your body, being with the breath, being with the sensations, and coming back to that over and over is going to help you be in your body even at high states of arousal while still maintaining a sense of control, but in this kind of, again, observational way. Not like control, like I can't come, I can't come, I can't come, but like I have mastery over this, right? If this is interesting to you for your own penis or for a partner that has a penis, please reach out. I have a lot of different posts about this for men. I'm going to drop a link into the chat right now that's about climbing the staircase of arousal. This is on my Patreon. And again, for people with penises, when you are self pleasuring, start to get curious about anal play, about nipple play, about stroking your chest or stroking your arms or stroking your face so that you start to sensitize your whole body and that we take that focus out of the genitals and let it expand all through our whole body. If you have a partner, again, I invite you to explore this separately so that you can start to make those bridges and make those connections. And then when you start to bring it into your partnered practice, there is a conversation to be had, right? I definitely have worked with couples before who one person is really into this kind of stuff and the other person is not for whatever reason. So if you are the person who's really into it and you are just bringing this to your partner, I would really invite you to have a very gentle conversation about, hey, I've been exploring some new stuff. I would really like to bring some of this into our sex life. Are you open to experimenting with me? We don't want to surprise people. We don't want to make them feel bad for not kind of being in the same space as you are on your journey, but understanding kind of where your person is on their journey is really helpful. This is especially important, like I was saying earlier, our orgasm means a certain thing to us, sometimes our partner's orgasm means a certain thing to us. And so, if I have a male partner who's not having ejaculations because he's doing some work, especially if I don't know about it, I might start to feel really weird about that. And I appreciate one of our current attendees who brought this to my attention, where it was like, oh, the women that I have sex with don't understand that I'm doing this work and therefore they feel like inadequate or that I'm not attracted to them because I'm not having this kind of typical orgasm. And that's not true at all. But if you're practicing these new things, you need to have conversations about it. And same thing if you have a pussy and you have a partner, learning to bring your partner on board within these experiments is really, really powerful. And that can take a lot of work. Again, this is why we're here in our professional capacity to work with couples who want to explore this. And this can take some time, right? So we are always our own best lover. So this is our work to do. And then, if we are so lucky to have a beloved to practice with, how do we bring this together in practice? Um, I want to drop in. Okay, so that is that is kind of all I have. I know there's some questions in the chat, so I want to get to that, but I want to just wrap us up quickly and then I'll stop the recording and we'll go into Q&A to really just say thank you to all of you for being on this journey. I appreciate all of you taking time out of your Saturday morning or afternoon to talk about pleasure. And I appreciate you for being here and being part of this community. Thank you for the hearts. I can see them, Rob. I appreciate it. I really look forward to staying connected with you. So, again, I have a Patreon. This is a membership based platform where you can get delicious pleasure education. I post all my workshops like this. I post all sorts of stories about how we play and what we do and toys we like and all different things from our erotic toolkit that you may also enjoy. And I've just launched a new offering called Mini Tantra mini sessions. So, this is for you if you are interested in exploring. I have a collection of practices on the website I just dropped in. This is a way for you to start to explore some of the magic of Tantra and sacred sexuality in a very sweet mini session that gives you a chance to just like drop in with yourself or with your beloved. So, those are also available now. So, thank you everyone for being here. Please stay on for the Q&A, and I'll see you all next month.